So it is, as I think it's also called the law of vital few, if I'm not wrong, General Nanda. So today we have an expert in General Nanda who has practiced it himself, mastered it, and in fact has helped many individuals and groups enhance their effectiveness through this model, through this 80-20 principle. So before I request Mr. Sindwani to come and introduce today's speaker, I would request Dr. Khan to please come and present a bouquet to General Nanda. Along with Dr. M.S. Kang, I also welcome Dr. Mrs. Nanda from Bareilly, and I also welcome Dr. Mrs. Nandini Bedi, Senior Consultant, Pediatric Department, Pediatric Surgeon, CMC. Mr. Sindwani, please.
Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my privilege to introduce to you our guest speaker this evening, Major General H.S. Nanda. Major General H.S. Nanda is an alumnus of Government Medical College, Jabalpur. He completed MBBS in the year 1975 and then joined the Armed Forces Medical Services in January 1977. He has been an avid sportsman during his younger days, having captained several times in college. He played hockey and badminton at junior national level. During MOBC in 1977, he played for the AMC Center during the Corps reunion activities. In the early part of his career, he was posted to Indore Medical College, where he did 2 years of MD medicine as a registered candidate, and then did MD anesthesia from AFMC Pune in 1985. He became a senior advisor anesthesia at Command Medical Air Force Bangalore and recognized professor and examiner and member of LIC team with Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, Bangalore. In the rank of brigadier, he wore the blue uniform and was the principal medical officer of the prestigious and strategically important Southwestern Air Command, looking after the western border, adjoining areas of Gujarat, Rajasthan and Maharashtra. Then he served as Deputy Commandant and Dean Academics, CH, AF Bangalore. His area of interest has been the management of all aspects of the ICU, especially ventilator therapy of acute lung injuries. He has been a member of the Quality Assurance Team for NABH at Command Medical Air Force. The General Officer is well known for his passion in the game of bridge, which he pursues by playing at national level. At present, he is Major General Medical Uttar Bharat area, one of the most prestigious posts of the Indian Army. He has been invited to give motivational talks at various institutes and organizations on the 80-20 principle. We are indeed very glad to have you here, sir, today, and I'm sure the topic 80-20 principle, as Kamal said, although it is unrelated to the medical field which he specializes, but I'm sure this is going to be useful to all of us in whatever profession or business we are. Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Sindwani. Mr. J.R. Singhal, the President of the Ludhiana Management Association, Mr. Kamal Vadhera, the General Secretary, and delighted to be here. You know, it is such a privilege and indeed an honor to speak to such an august gathering. And I say that not to eulogize you. I say that because I mean it. And I mean it because amongst you, we have some of the best minds in the field of management, industry, and indeed a whole lot of professionals sitting here. Years ago, and over a lifetime, it has grown to become a concept in which I have developed a lot of conviction. And when I shared it with my greatest critics, my children, they thought that it had a message worth sharing. You know, as a child in my parents' home and even in my own home, there has always been a very vibrant undercurrent. There has been a sense of security, a sense of warmth. Even when it is quiet, there is a friendly silence that prevails. But unfortunately, in spite of all the material advances that have taken place, there is something missing in the homes of the modern day generation. It is almost as though whilst we walk on the broad roads, today's generation is on the narrow side lanes. It can be a fast lane, it can be a slow lane. In either case, it is going to generate a certain amount of stress. If we pick up the front page of any leading daily today, unfortunately, what do we see? There are several baby falaks who are killed every day. There are several Bhaginas and indeed Nephayas who are raped. There are several Uma Maheshwaris who are knifed by their teenage students. You have a lot of road rage. You have farmers committing suicide. You have scams in the magnitude that we never heard of. Unfortunately, it has also percolated into the uniform lot. So, are we getting into a quagmire of omniscience from which it will be very difficult to extricate ourselves? What I have tried to do is simply to assemble, formalize a known concept as a way of life which, if followed, may declutter a person, may give him more time, he can achieve more and thereby generate more happiness. That was the whole purpose of assembling this talk. It's a very humble way of making such an attempt. As a prelude to the talk, I shall be using the terms 80-20 and ABC all throughout my talk. Now what do I mean? What I mean is that in any walk of life, everything can be divided into the A and the B, which are the vital few, which are just 20% in number, but they account for 80, 90 or 100% results. Right? Now, this is true for people also. In any organization, in any institution, you have 20% of the people who will give you 80, 90 or 100% of results. You have a large majority of things which are known as the C items or the C people. They constitute 80%, but in effect their output is 20% or less, at times negligible, 0%. This is something that we need to keep in mind as we go along. The idea originated in the early part of the last century when a gentleman called Wilfredo Pareto in 1906 observed that the economy of Italy was very lopsided, in that 80% of the total wealth of Italy was with 20% of the people. Now, not only that, this, when he looked around the rest of Europe, he found that this was true for all countries in Europe. So, Italy, alright. So, not only was 80% of the wealth with 20% of the people, it was also very non-linear and predictably unbalanced. Now, what I mean is that if 20% of the people had 80% of the money, maybe 10% of the people had 65% of the total wealth of the country, and possibly 5% of the people had half the GDP of that country. Now, if you look at India today, I read a stats, less than 4% of Indians have 50% of the total economy of our country, and we can name them. You know, the top industrialists, you have the top actors, the top sports persons, the professionals, the lawyers, the doctors maybe. Alright? So that was something that, well, he observed. At the same time, as a minor sort of a coincidence, he saw that the peas that grew in his kitchen garden, 80% of those that survived came out of 20% of the pots. Just an interesting coincidence. Wilfredo had two friends who maintained an inventory. I'll call them pharmacists. Okay. Now, while friend A would take 10 hours to do his inventory keeping, friend B would do the same thing in 1/5 of the time, in 20% of the time, in 2 hours. When Wilfredo went into the details, he found that while his friend A was equating all items with equal value, let's say he sold a few hundred aspirins, few hundred vitamin C's, a few hundred tablets of folic acid, ferricel for calcium. Now their value was negligible. The total profit that he would earn from this, only on the A and the B items, simply adding an arbitrary figure of 50 rupees as profit for the C items. Let's say he sold a coronary stent once in 3 days. Let's say he sold a high-end antibiotic, a chemotherapeutic agent which ran into thousands, or a knee joint, which was again very expensive. So he simply accounted for these things, added an amount of 50 rupees. His accounts were nearly as good as friend A's. He had much more time to multitask, earn more, and be happier. Now, while Wilfredo had all these concepts, he was not very good at penning things. At the same time, this was during the First World War, the Mussolini regime saw that this guy had some potential. So they picked him up. And because he was well ahead of his years and he did not agree with the fascist regime, Benito had him eliminated in 1922. And unfortunately, this idea then remained buried for the next quarter of a century. And it was then picked up by, you all will know, the guru of modern quality management, a man called Joseph Moses Juran. He died recently, a Romanian-born US citizen. He immediately realized the potential of what Wilfredo had discovered. What did he do? Look at the ethics of the man. First of all, he called it the Pareto principle. He could have very easily called it Juran's principle. Then, it was the early 50s when he tried to tell the Americans about this idea. Now, American industry, as you all know, in the early 50s was doing very well. And possibly, being a little brash by nature, the Americans said, no, look, we don't want to live. The same Japanese heard of it. And they called him over to Japan. And he lectured them